All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Tennis Channel Inside In on the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. Mitch Michals from the Santa Monica studios. Delighted as always to recap the Australian Open, discuss major champions, and again, listen to us on all your platforms. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube for the video. Real treat as always, second time on the show, so now he's an official reoccurring guest. One of the most exciting, energetic, and professional broadcasters in the game of tennis. And this South African man is fresh off calling another major, the exceptional, exciting Australian Open. Robbie Koenig, welcome back to Tennis Channel Inside In. It's good to catch up with you.
It is, Mitch. It was a fantastic month down there. Did the United Cup, had a week off, did some fly fishing in between, actually. I shot over to New Zealand for a couple of days. So recharged my batteries for the AO. So I went in there all guns blazing, and what a great fortnight it was. I know you were keeping an eye on things, so I mean, we could spend 2 or 3 hours on the show easily and still not get done.
Oh, we certainly could. We're going to try to cram all we can in to this discussion here. But I have to start with this, Robbie, because you've been exceptionally generous with your time at all times. But, you know, we're going to pull the curtain back for the people listening and watching. We were going to do this a day before. And you said, hey, would you mind if I pushed it a day? And I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. You gave me like the best reason anyone's given to delay it. You were going to watch cricket with the former world number 1 and 3-time champ. So Gustavo Kuerten was in South Africa and you guys went to the cricket match. I'll start with that. I feel honored. Like being bumped by him is an honor to me.
Yeah, he's such a rock star. He got in touch with us a couple of months ago, said he was coming out to South Africa and he wanted some recommendations on where to go and what to do. He's always been a big surfer. So obviously Durban, where I'm from, is a real surfing hotspot. He's heading off to Cape Town today. And yeah, it just so happens that both of my cousins that are brothers, the one's a doctor here, surfs every morning of his life. So that was an easy fix. And his other brother who lives in Cape Town will take Guga out on a couple of occasions going surfing there. Yeah, and the cricket competition that's going on now is quite a big thing. And he had some of the players staying in his hotel. And he said, hey, Robbie, you're going to go to the cricket? And I said, why not? Let's do it, man. And we caught up at the cricket. I just got in from Melbourne. And he's the kind of guy who's up for everything. And actually, last week he was with my former doubles partner, John Lafney Diaga, up at King's Camp there, checking out some of the wildlife, which blew him out of the water. So far, he's had a good stay. And the guy never changes, man. He's just a bundle of energy, just loves life. What an awesome family, Mitch. That they had a full crew with him. Not only his 2 kids, but they've got the nephews as well with them. I think there were 5 kids in total. So him and his wife, every 10 minutes they're counting to make sure they've got 5 chickens with them all the time. So it was quite funny, but great to catch up with Guga. Shared a lot of stories from when we first met, actually in a warm-up event right before Miami. Came across this guy playing on hard courts down there in Marathon. Key West. And it's funny, the one thing that struck me about him wasn't the ground strokes, but the serve. Couldn't believe this long, lanky dude from South America, because they traditionally didn't have big servers, could hit the serve so big. I played him some dubs back then, and it was great. You reminisce about the old days, the new days. Now that we've got kids and we've all moved on, so it's so nice to be able to host him when he's in your own backyard. And that tennis fraternity is tight. It's fantastic, man. It really is.
It's good to hear about Guga, just such a positive guy out there, and happy that he's still staying in touch with his tennis community. Getting back, Robbie, to the Australian Open. I started with this. There's a lot of notes. We're going to get to Sinner and Sabalenka winning the titles, but it's another example of you've been within the game of tennis for several decades now, too many to count. But just when you think you've kind of seen it all, or different storylines, and you could say, well, I've seen this before, we kind of know how this is going to go. It's another example. This Australian Open was another example that you haven't seen it all, and there's new and exciting and unpredictable ways championship level tennis could play out.
I might have said it on a couple of occasions on your show. That's why sport's the best form of reality TV. And in a mono situation, the storylines, is just so many of them. Again, we had late finishes. We had day sessions that were insanely long. Matches that matchups. I mean, some of the first round matchups that we had, how good were some of those? Dominic Thiem and Felix Auger-Aliassime. I did that one. What a match that was. The woman, obviously from an American perspective, Coco doing as well as she did was a big story. The record turnout of fans that we had in Oz, and I actually said to you just before we came on air, we were talking about how good it was down there, and I was just going to say the last two majors, I cannot recall ever seeing so many fans on site. It was the same at the US Open. I've never seen the ground so full, and same in Melbourne now. I mean, it was wall to wall. And you talk about a fan experience, Mitch. They do a lot of things right there. Always looking to make it the best possible experience. More shaded area, more stuff going on away from the courts when you've got a bit of time and you want to watch some music concerts or food vendors that were just so darn good. You could pick every single day. There were so many highlights, and of course, a Sunday start. Let's not forget that. Every single day you could pick numerous storylines, which I guess in sport is what you want, and that's what makes these big events so good, right?
Certainly does. I would say to add to that, absence makes the heart grow fonder. The fact that we're coming out of the pandemic and people were just missing tennis and missing the big crowds. Again, hats off to Tennis Australia for the job they did putting on such a show. The people certainly liked it. It was an awesome start to the season.
Mitch, a quick one. I want to get your thoughts as well, because I was on the ground. What do you think about the crowd being allowed in on the even games? What was the feedback like, the feeling in the States?
I'll give you my take, and I think it's pretty similar. I like it. I like it finding ways to make tennis more exciting to a point, and I don't think it was too egregious. I know, anything new, right, in any sport in tennis is going to take maybe some adjusting, and you can't get people to agree. But if the players were on board and they knew that this is what was happening, then I don't see the issue. Like, it's even games letting them come in isn't that big of a deal. I've also, Robbie, been on the other side of it, maybe a little more than you, where I'm the spectator. And it's nice to have that opportunity to wait till a game is over. You're not interrupting play, and just let the fans return to their seats. So I think it was positive, and I think any way you can make this sport move along a little bit, but also more exciting and kind of increase engagement, I think it's a good thing.
Absolutely. Fan experience is everything. And I think coming off the back of the pandemic, as you mentioned, when the players were, banging on about, how sterile the environment was and they couldn't wait to have the fans back, I think a little bit of extra movement was no big deal at all. And it's refreshing.
Certainly agree with that. Got to talk about the men's champion, Jannik Sinner, first Grand Slam, second Italian man to win a major. Shout out to Adriano Pinata, though. I mean, we got to pay respect there. 1976 RG, beat Borg along the way. Held the mantle for so long as the only man from his country to win a major. But Jannik Sinner enters the club. And Robbie, there's winning a major and there's winning a major. And he went through Novak Djokovic and Daniil Medvedev, coming from 2 sets down in that final. It's all, to me, about the process. And you heard it with his coach and his team and Darren Cahill and everybody that's worked with him along the way, including Ricardo Piata, who, as you mentioned on Twitter, was very instrumental to his game. But where he's come in the last 18 months especially, but his whole career, it was building to a moment like this. He had the run of his life, Robbie. He's going to most likely build on it. But it's special what he showed and how he got incrementally better along the way, culminating in the first of maybe several major titles.
3 top 5 wins. Don't forget Rublev in the previous round as well, to go on to win the first major. So that is big time. And you are so right about a young kid who believes so much in the process and always looking to get better, always add to his game, even if it was at the expense of losing. And it's hard as a player, right? When you're losing and you keep coming in, or you try different things with the serve, but you stick at it. And that stickability can never be underestimated. And to have that growth mindset, you have to surround yourself with the right people. And I think he's got a very strong team in place. Darren's been through changes with players where they've had to tinker with technique. So your ability to trust that process, the fact that he's been there and done it with, the likes of Halep, Leighton at a younger age, Andre at a much older age, that gives him so much experience as well, that he can always give that confidence to Jannik to trust the process. Then you've got a young friend like Simone who's been with him since he switched from Riccardo Piatti. So I think the most important thing is to have a good team around you. So we see that. and secondly, how strong this guy is. He's so qualified from the neck up, man. It's
Mm,
unbelievable how calm he was. There were moments there at the tail end of the third set when he was pretty close to getting broken, where you could see he was absolutely fuming, but he refused to let that get in the way of what he wanted to achieve. And I think for that, a lot of the credit goes to Riccardo Piatti, who in the early days, he got him from the age of 14 till 2 years ago. So 14 to 20, probably 6 of the most crucial years in his development. And he only played twice a week before he arrived at Riccardo, right? So
yeah.
I think the foundation that Piatti laid was just immense. And I think these guys that have taken over since then, they've been able to polish him up, make some changes with the serve. And, it's the perfect recipe now. And I can't applaud the guy enough. What an amazing young man. And just when we were worried about whether tennis will be in good hands, post the Big Three era, we couldn't ask for a better ambassador, together with the likes of a Holger Rune or, a Carlos Alcaraz especially. Right? Those two, they practiced together in the off-season, didn't they? They spent the day together at the Ferrero Academy. They get on so well. There's a healthy rivalry there. Man, I just hope I can stick around the sport for the next 20 years commentating again.
Yeah, that was a great point you made. I haven't really thought of it about getting better at it in the process if you have to lose at the expense of losing. It made me think of, golf legend Tiger Woods fixing his swing when he realized, look, I have to take short-term losses to get better in the long term. And, Sinner's process-oriented mind coming from, the neck up, as you said. How about the fact, Robbie, that he beats Novak Djokovic, and we'll get into that match specifically in a second, but that's the classic letdown spot. Like he realized, and he was down 2 sets where, look, the job's not done yet. There's still another match to win. He didn't want to go down as just someone that beats Djokovic in a major without hoisting the trophy. So I was thoroughly impressed. And I also look at the long-term outlet, as you said, what he's done with his game, Robbie. It's like, where are the weaknesses? He is strong in just about every area. And it's not just being weakness of Jason. He's got real strengths just about everywhere you look on the tennis court.
I mean, you bang on. And, I make the comparison between him and Felix Auger because I think Felix hasn't evolved enough with his game. I think his net game, the ability to come forward, recognize when he's hit good shots, and I don't think he's capitalizing enough on the good shots that he plays from the back of the court. His transition game is not nearly as good as Jannik's. And I look at where Felix was, say, 3 years ago, getting to the semis of a Masters 1000 when he was 18 or 19 in Miami. Sinner was pretty close to doing the same. But then, all hype was on Felix, and we were wondering where Sinner was. But now, especially in the last 18 months, as you said, what happens when you're working on something, you're working on it. It's like when you're dropping the old dye in the red bowl of water. The first couple of times it doesn't start to change, it looks just the same. And then suddenly you get to a tipping point. And we saw that tipping point at the tail end of last year, when he started to play so well indoors. And I'm talking about Jannik here. And then obviously he beats Novak 2 out of the 3 times he plays him. And then it was like, okay, suddenly everything comes together, and it comes together quickly. Now, when you don't work on your game enough, you don't evolve enough as a player, I think you get what's happening to Felix right now. And for me, looking back at the last 3 years, he's stagnated. The serve issues, that's not settled. The transition game. So for me, it's a nice case study when you have that growth mindset and you're prepared to lose, but still work on development. It's hard, man. It's hard because you're winning a lot as it is. It's like, well, do I want to give up a couple of $100,000 there to work on something? No, but you're going to sign a deal with Nike for a reportedly $158 million if you're Jannik Sinner, right? And you've got all things going in the right direction.
Wow, that's a report. 158. I got to look into that. Wow.
Yeah.
Pays to be the top, but it's a brutally tough sport in the sense of winning and competing at the high level. The margins are so thin, as we know. But yeah, Sinner, and you mentioned it. Like you never know when it's all going to come together if you work on your game, but it's that 1% here, 1% there, and suddenly it comes together, and he's a major champion. That final, Robbie, against Daniil Medvedev, I mean, that was an exceptional match, and I don't want to look at this in hindsight as a Medvedev 2 sets to love collapse, because you can talk about the man that played 24 hours on court and also showed a lot of mettle in how he played that match. Those first 2 sets, he changed up his game style to completely be a player that could last with the wounded animal sense, his legs not being there. So I don't look at it more as a collapse and maybe the sense of, losing 2 sets, Robbie. I think that was a player that ran out of steam and did all he could to compete, but best of 5 just wasn't enough.
Yeah, you're so right. Let's not forget the previous round against Zverev. He was down 2-0 in a world of hurt. Zverev looked like he was going to beat him in straight sets, but he just hung on in there. And I think the effect of that, Rusevori, don't forget Rusevori early on in the tournament, right? Finishing at 3:40 a.m. That was the second round match, wasn't? So you're bang on. It's definitely not a match that he'll look back on like the Nadal match when he had Nadal, 2-0 up. He was fresh. He had him. What was that scoreline? 2-3 love 40. Everybody's taken a picture of that scoreline, haven't they, back in the day? And we was all over him. And that for me was, he got a lot more tighter in that match. No question about it. He was outplayed in the final here. Sinner got incrementally better as that third set started to wear on. And then I think, from about midway through that fourth set, Sinner was the better player. And as you say, just the way he plays eventually caught up with him. The fact that he was trying to come in, keep the points nice and short when he won. I can tell you, I was around the green room when the finals was going on, and everybody's heads were shaking. Like, how is Medvedev doing this with the amount of tennis that he's played? I think everybody, to a man, thought that Sinner was going to win in straight sets. So I'm a massive fan of the guy, massive fan of Medvedev.
Yeah.
I think, as Jim Courier was saying, the greatest interview, certainly post-match in our sport. The guy gives you everything. He speaks from his heart. He's articulate. And if you can't like him, you're bloody tough to please, man.
Yeah, Jim told me those same things. I was like, it makes sense because they both have dry senses of humor, so it makes sense they'd be fans of each other. I would also say that it's weird coming off of a guy, and I know the major final record is down to 1-5, but he's played great players. They're all in context. I came away more impressed with Medvedev in a weird way after this final match, what he was able to do. And Robbie, he's still a tough out everywhere. So that's the one thing I'd say is Medvedev at 27, positive outlook, handling this loss better than just about anyone would. And he remains on any surface, even on clay, even though he sandbags a little bit, he's still a tough out in every tournament he plays.
He's a Masters 1000 winner on clay at Rome. I mean, it's not like it was at Madrid where it's got a little asterisk because of the altitude there. So no, bang on there. But it's interesting the philosophy that he's had for the 2024 season. He said he's going to be less spiky with fans and umpires, and he just needs to focus better on court. And I think he did that with considerable aplomb. I think you walk away from a major like this knowing that you did everything possible in your power, that you gave blood, sweat, and tears. As Chris Martin would have said, you got to bleed yourself dry. And I think that's what he did. He bled himself dry to try and get the win. And it's going to be fascinating because he mentioned in his post-match speech, didn't he? Interview, where he said he doesn't know how it's going to play out because after he lost to Rafa, he had the worst season of his career. I don't think that's going to be the case this year. I thought he played a good final, no choking going on there. Anybody who suggests that, I think, just doesn't understand the sport.
More with Robbie Koenig here on Tennis Channel Inside In. It was a great run by Medvedev to get to the final. Sinner wins the title, and he beat Novak Djokovic, the king in Australia, a 10-time champion there. Beat him in 4 sets in the semifinal. From the Djokovic perspective, and you've gone on record as saying it was startling to see his level or lack thereof in this match, given what we've expected from how all-time great this guy is. So I guess starting the discussion off here, Robbie, looking at what happened from Djokovic's side, do you just contribute this to a bad day? Do you contribute this to maybe, look, he's a 36-year-old guy and he's not going to be as surprised he once was. Was it the conditions? Where do we look at a couple days after of Djokovic's level in that semifinal loss?
Mitch, I'm not sure he was playing that well the whole tournament, let alone just that match. I mean, against Dino Prismic in the first round, 4 hours and 10 minutes, I think it was. Against the young 18-year-old, gave him a good nudge, no question about that. He's a good player, but even then, a lot of us were like, "Wow, that's unusual for a first-round match." And I just don't think he looked dialed in. The backhand in particular, the backhand was like shocking against Sinner. How many he missed, like routine backhands. The serve wasn't the usual self, the accuracy. So, he said he was trying to shake off a bit of flu early on in the tournament. So, all those things affect you. And, I can't think of a match where he played and we were thinking, wow, Novak is back now. He's back to playing his best. It's the second week of the major. No.
Right.
And then, I think we were all shocked when he loses the first two sets the way he does. The fact that he still got to the semis of a major and he's put himself in contention, and you almost feel like he's playing at a 6.8 on the Dave Portnoy scale. That's scary for how well you still have to play in order to beat him. But of course, for Sinner now, the fact that Sinner's beaten him again in such a short time frame, the belief that it gives Jannik, irrespective of how Novak's playing, you've got to think what it does for Jannik is it's invaluable, right? To do it over best of 5 sets. I think that's what's going to help Sinner so much when they play, this year again, which I'm sure they will do.
He'd beaten him a few times, but winning that in a best of 5 was the only doubt that might have been there. Like, can I do it here? And he proved it, and the sky's the limit there. Yeah, Djokovic not having a single break point in that match, we're watching it like this is, and it's still finding a way to win one set. He is, Robbie, a victim of standards, similar to, how Federer was when Djokovic came up. Like that I created a monster quote where, look, you're expected to win every tournament you're in, which is just insane, but that's the level we expect. I'm not writing him off. You had the quote that said he'll retire when he stops winning slams. Like I understand that. But when you get to a certain point age-wise, these bad days tend to happen a little more often than they did when you were in your late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, they do. But when you've been, I think we'll only see where that tipping point is in hindsight. Everybody wants to be the first, right? That's the culture that we live in. I called it first. I called it first. I was the one who picked Sinner to win the Australian Open, and Djokovic was never going to be the same. I tell you what, I'm not going to write that guy off. No chance. The guy won 4 of the 5 biggest tournaments last year. 3 majors plus the ATP finals, and he did pretty well in Wimbledon, right? He should have won that too. So yeah, it'll be fascinating in hindsight. But I tell you what, that guy's so motivated. Who's going to beat him on a grass court, right? Who's going to beat him on a grass court? Sinner's going to have to play pretty well on the grass to beat him. Alcaraz's going to have to play lights out again, and like he did in the final, and he still should have lost that final. So, I think he's going to be extremely tough to beat at Wimbledon, US Open. He's going to be in the mix again. And the French, Nadal, so many questions about Rafa. I'm picking Novak for at least 2 majors this year. There's only 3 left.
Oh, it weirdly, it's that one swinging volley that's changed everything. I would say Wimbledon. It's funny, of all the majors, it's the one he didn't win last year. I feel most confident in Wimbledon. I think we're in a great place with tennis, and I'm just curious to see what Novak's schedule looks like. He's gotten to that age, that late 30s, where he's going to prioritize health, rounding up for the majors. How much tennis does he play and what events is really the only thing I'm looking at over the next couple months.
Yeah, and he's been a master of that, hasn't he, Mitch? So he'll know exactly how he's feeling. And of course, if he feels like he does need an additional tournament in his schedule, there's no problem getting wild cards there. So to be able to fine tune, you know what it's like when you've done a podcast a couple of times. The first one's always difficult. When you're on to your 100th one, you know exactly how it works out, right?
Blends together a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. It's I try to be the Novak Djokovic of podcasting when I can. High standards. Before we get to the women, I did want to mention one other thing. The other semifinalist, Alex Zverev, and I know there's a lot going on the serious side, the cloud going on after. We respect all that and the process that's going out there. But on the tennis side, the one note I had is, Robbie, it's great that he's back at this level for his sake and getting to a semifinal. But a match against Medvedev, it's another match where he loses to the same guy and another match where he looked like the better player for most of it. So how much do you think that's, it's a great run. He beats Alcaraz, he gets to the semi, but he just can't shake this guy. And it has to be infuriating when you've been the better player for most of these matches.
Of course it does. I mean, the mental scoring down the road, that's where it comes into play every single time he wants to win one of these things. And he is so desperate to win one of them. That's what I wanted to see. I wanted to see Sinner take on Zverev with so much on the line. Zverev would have had more gas in the tank had he beaten Medi in straight sets, which he should have done. that's the final I actually wanted to see. Two guys who haven't won before. Similar when Zverev was playing Dominic Thiem, right? To see them both getting tight, how they were going to handle the situation.
That was the tightest tiebreak of all. Like that fifth set tiebreak. Watch that. You wouldn't, if you didn't know pro tennis, you would not think these are two guys playing for men's major final.
Exactly. So, that's what I wanted to see play out. But, Sinner under the pump against Medvedev showed, that he knows how to handle the big moments. And I think, what did he say? He likes to dance in the storm of pressure.
That was perfect.
Which, it tells us that he wants to be in those big moments. And I think if you've got that mindset, that's the mindset, getting back to Zverev, that he needs to adopt, needs to feel comfortable in. And it's not easy when you keep coming across this guy Medvedev, because when you don't get the win, man, you know what it's like in a one-on-one sport. You start to even dread seeing that person in the same side of your draw, and that can affect you getting to even playing against them. So, but there were so many good signs about how well he was playing up until that moment. I think he's just got to keep reminding himself it's applying the finishing touches. And I think what's crucial for me is that the improvements that need to be made are not technical. Don't have to worry about the serve, the forehand or whatever. It's definitely, for me, between the ears. And that's where the improvement needs to take place. And I don't know how much work he's doing in that department, whether he's as dialed in as someone like Novak is, but that's the improvement. Forget about forehands and serves. You don't need to hit any more reps. That is not the problem.
You beat a guy like Alcaraz, and it's not a fluke. You're the better player. It shows you all you need to know about your game. So I agree with you completely there. Figuring out the mental side of tennis is the battle that every tennis player wages themselves, and some prevail, some don't. On to the women now. Robbie Koenig here on Tennis Channel Inside In. Aryna Sabalenka goes back to back. She repeats as champ and does it flawlessly. This is someone that their mental side, speaking of that, had been often criticized and critiqued, and some for obvious and deserved reasons. Look at what she's done the last 2 years in majors. There hasn't been a player on the women's side, surely, other than Novak on the men's side, that's been as consistent as Aryna Sabalenka. She goes back to back, does not drop a set, and there is comfort in playing where you've won before. She played beautiful tennis. She played, dare I say, a little smarter tennis, and she's now a two-time major champion.
You talk about personal accountability, right? It goes back to that discussion she had with their coach. I can't even remember if it was 2020. It was 2022, wasn't it, with Anton Dubrov in Dubai, when she was serving all the double faults, and he was struggling to help her, and he said to her, Aryna, I can't help you anymore. You need to get another coach. I've tried everything I know, and it's not helping you. I'm prepared to walk away for your benefit. And she comes back to him and says, no, the problem is not you. The problem is me. And we are going to work this thing out together, and you're going to be part of that process. And man, for me, I get goosebumps just thinking about it, Mitch. Because so often how we see players always blaming somebody else rather than taking that responsibility upon themselves. And you talk about a good example, and that's the perfect example for me. She's figured it out. The serve is as good as it's ever been. The mentality is as good as it's ever been. She believes that she can win these things. And boy, she is a great quote that Richard Evans wrote about, it was Rod Laver when Rod was playing at his peak. He was like a king sweeping the squatters out of his castle. And that's what she did on the women's side of the draw. I mean, she was so dominant.
When I saw her, the warm-up videos, drawing on her coach's head, kicking the water bottle, really giving that guy a hard time, by the way. But when I saw those videos of her just being so bubbly and loose, it made me think about an old adage I learned, that everybody warms up differently, that there are players that have to be serious, the Rafa serious mentality. Some players, and it's all about what your personality is, she needed to kind of be loose. She needed not to be wound up so tight, because when she gets on the court, she's a killer. Like, there is no denying her competitive. But it just showed me that, and it showed me how, look, she is clearly, like, she's going to be gunning for number one. Iga had a letdown here. Sabalenka is in it for the long haul, and now that she's in that double major club, I don't expect this to slow down at all in the near future.
No way. You're bang on. And you're so right about what works for you. And I think that's a great message to to coaches out there that every single player is different. Even when you're coaching in a team environment, my son is part of the Baylor tennis team, right? And the way that one one player trains might be different, and the fitness stuff that he has to do is different, and the way he needs to be spoken to is different, because you're dealing with 6 very different personalities. And it's the same when you look across the top 100 in the rankings. Everyone's slightly different, Mitch, and they have found the formula. Jason Stacey's the butt of a lot of the stuff that goes on there, but he understands his role. I'm sure there's a serious side as well. I think he comes from like a UFC background. This Jason, he's into his taekwondo and all that kind of stuff, and he is one fierce looking guy. So there's definitely a serious side there. But they just get the blend so nice. Oh, that's what I was thinking of as well. That speech after she lost to Rybakina in Brisbane, when she was like, "Whoa, what was that, Aryna? You just open up a can of whoop-ass here on me, and 3 games is all I was allowed to get. Please don't play that well sort of when you come to Australia." So she just gets it, man. Your ability to deflect that pressure away, bang on.
It's perfect. And she's really coming into her own at this point, which is exceptional. For the other finalists, want to mention her, Qinwen Zheng, Chinese woman, gets to the final. The road wasn't as tough, no top 50 players, but she's living up to her potential too. And like we talked about last week on the show, ahead of schedule for her age, and now at number 7 in the rankings, a bona fide top 10 player. The run didn't end well, but this is one where you look back on as the quote unquote major breakthrough. This is only going to propel her for future success. And I know it's a bad taste in your mouth losing here, but just getting to the final and getting this experience is, Robbie, as you said before, invaluable to her development and her aspirations.
Absolutely. And Mitch, hey, RK's outside pick to win it. RK's outside pick.
I heard that, yeah.
So I was so happy to see her go deep. I've been a big fan of hers since, I'd say, beginning of last year. I thought she was going to do well at both Wimbledon and the US Open. Didn't quite pan out. I'm just going to, if I keep picking her, she's going to come good. And she came good for me and all, so sooner rather than later. Again, I just love the way she carries herself, right? She's a fearlessness about her. I love the fact that she's got Pierre Reba in her camp, who I think is an excellent coach. Clearly didn't want to play second fiddle to Brad or anybody else in Coco's camp. And was happy to go back with a player that he'd worked with before. And it's paid off straight away. So big props to them. It seems like they've got a nice team around her, and she's going to be knocking on the door, man, a lot. And she's got great personality. Such a big market as well, the Chinese market. So 10 years since Lino ended up winning there. Fantastic for the sport. The women's game is in a good place, of course, from American perspective. You've got Coco. So you've got some big countries, big characters, different characters,
Right.
And I think that makes for a good recipe.
Certainly does. Lina showing up, giving, Qinwen a proper hello greeting as well, which was nice to see. It was, and then you have 4 majors to pick her to win. So every year you got 4 chances. So that's always good. The American side too, you mentioned Coco Gauff loses to Sabalenka in the semis in a rematch at US Open final, gives her toughest match by far. She's up to number 3, and how she's processing, really, Robbie, when I look at it, how she processes these minor or major setbacks just shows you the growth and maturity there. And I was thinking back to our last convo after Wimbledon, first round exit. Where's her forehand? Where's her game? What's going on? She's rounding into the 3rd best player in the world, and someone that we're just going to expect, and deservedly so, to be in these second week of slams consistently.
And the similar growth mindset to what we're talking about with Jannik Sinner, right? It's like, okay, I'll go away and figure out what I can do better, what I can do differently. And she's done that. And you just get the feeling that she's never satisfied with what she's got. I get the feeling she does enjoy the victories along the way, but man, she's got a bigger goal in mind. And I think with that growth mindset, she's only going to get better and better if she can just continue to look to come forward a little bit more. And she already volleys pretty well. she plays a lot of dubs. When her and Jess have played together, they've done so well. So I think that's going to be easy for, whoever steps into that coaching role on a full-time basis. You just get the feeling she is so coachable, like a Sinner is, like an Alcaraz is. So what a pleasure, and already immense maturity at such a young age. Again, she's got herself surrounded these, good management group with Tony and Alessandro and everybody from Teammate there. So, the money side of things taken care of. So, I just hope they invest that wisely in whoever they bring on board in a permanent role there alongside Brad.
Wrapping up here with Robbie Koenig on Tennis Channel Insight, and I had two more topics from the 2024 Australian Open to get to. One, I'm not going to forget it. I'd be remiss if I did. Got to talk about Rohan Bopanna winning the doubles championship, getting the number one and doing it at 43 years old. I don't know if, that makes you maybe think about, hey, I might be able to come out of retirement and with all these old guys coming through. But what a great story, and what an example of persistence in a game that can have so many highs and lows for Bopanna to do this and get these firsts at 43 years of age, winning with Matt Ebden. Just an inspiring story from a guy who paid his dues and did it the right way.
He did. He certainly paid his dues. I know when Pops was around when I was just finishing up playing dubs. And, he tells a story a couple of years ago. I think it was 5 years ago. He was thinking about quitting, right? His child had just come along. The ranking was dropping. He was struggling to get into tournaments. And, his wife encouraged him to stay out there and keep on playing. And you never know what can happen. Persistence is the most underrated talent that you can have. And of course, you got to find the right partner. And I think Matt complements Bops so well. He is just solid all round. He is rock solid all round. And that gives Rohan the ability just to swing from the hip, especially when he's returning. The serve is world class, always has been. And of course, as you get wiser and older, you know how to play the game better. So often it's the body that lets you down, right? But the fact it's dubs, and you can get away with the body not having to be in pristine condition, just good enough condition. And that's where Bob says he's spoken about the fact that he's discovered yoga, and that's been a big part of him being able to stay out on tour as long as he has been now. And he's making bank, man. When you're making $1 million, I think he made 1 million last year. It's a lot of money, Mitch, especially at the tail end of your career. And then you start the next year by winning a major. There's a lot of players that, on the early 30s that would sign up for that, let alone 43.
Well, it's a special time. It's awesome that he was able to do this. It puts a bow along with Sinner and Sabalenka winning on an Australian Open. And I'll say, Robbie, it was a great fortnight. You had a lot of moments. Was there anything else that stood out, outside or some of the matches you called, things you got to see, witness from your perspective?
Yeah, there was. There's one thing I definitely want to touch on, and that was Sinner thanking his parents after he won the title in that trophy ceremony. And there was a lot of it on social media when he said, I've got the best parents at the age of 14. They trusted me to go out and make those decisions. That I wanted to be a tennis pro, moved to Bordighera with Riccardo Piatti and try and develop my tennis from there. And that's a fascinating discussion there. Of course, that is the best case scenario when it does work out. But I would almost argue, Mitch, that there are way more examples of kids, and especially at that age, where the parents have been really pushy in order to get to the desired goal, because I don't believe that most 14-year-olds have that maturity that Jannik had, that have the discipline. And I think for the most part, kids at that age need a bit of a nudge. And sometimes it's more than a bit of a nudge, especially in our sport where the skill level is so high, the physical level is so high, the mental level is so high. So I look at Jannik's statement is very much the outlier. And prior to that discussion that we were just having earlier, I think there's many different ways of doing it. You can come from rich backgrounds, you can come from poor backgrounds, you can come from parents that aren't involved much in the sport at all. Djokovic's parents, there's no tennis history there. There's not much of a tennis history in the Sinner family either. But you can have very pushy parents as well that, want to see the best for you and push you hard because you don't know what discipline is at 14. And that works too. So when there's a lot of coaches out there saying, listen to what Jannik says, got to be careful because it's certainly not the only way. And in my experience, it's the road that is less traveled. And I think it's harder to do it. And, I think Jannik was very fortunate that the guy that was his mentor at the age of 14 was Riccardo Piatti, somebody who had walked that road on numerous occasions. He had developed players like Cristiano Carratti or Enzo Furlan. He got Ivan Lubicic at a very young age. So is so much experience. He'd coached Novak Djokovic. He'd worked with Mira Sharapova. And I mean, this is the guy that's going to mentor you when you leave your parents. I mean, you talk about best case scenario. So, we could sit around a table and throw that idea around for a good 45 minutes at least. But I thought it was very interesting what he said. And you talk about being a credit to your parents. My gosh, Jannik is just that. But there's definitely many different sides to that discussion.
We could do an hour podcast just on that discussion. It's a very, very detailed, nuanced piece.
Yeah.
I agree with you that it is a road less traveled. A lot of children need to be nudged and need to be pushed in the right direction. There is the counter of don't push too hard or they're going to rebel. We've seen examples of parents that kind of do that in sports and then the kids don't stick with it. There is no one way to, as the old phrase goes, skin a cat. There is definitely a road less traveled. Sinner's case worked in Sinner's case because he had that motivation and he had top-notch parents that he's obviously making proud every day. But it was a nuanced thing. And yeah, I think the lesson to it, Robbie, is generalities, speaking in that way, don't always work. So you can't just take one person's story and apply it to everyone else. But it's a good jumping off point.
Yeah. No, thanks, Mitch. It was fantastic.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and I just wanted to also say, I wanted to get it out there on the record. You've been doing this for more years than you care to admit. I don't think you've lost your fastball yet, so there's still a lot.
Me and Kenny Powers, man.
Yeah, what a show. Eastbound and Down reference. I feel like we could just go off on that. But the last point of this whole thing is now we're into February. It's the only time in the tennis calendar, no Masters events and no slams. But this is where you put the work in, right? As a pro tennis player, the people, the guys and girls that win these big titles are putting in the hard yards in February. So it might seem like it's not an important time, but rest assured, the champions out there are grinding.
Hey, man, I tell you, Jannik Sinner was out there on the treadmill. I don't know if you saw that on social media today. He was out there on the treadmill and in the gym putting in some work. So when the guy who's just won a major is doing that, everybody else take note.
Yeah, got congratulated by the Pope, their prime minister. He's feeling the glow up there. So Robbie Koenig, always a pleasure. And the last thing is, have you stopped celebrating, finally finished celebrating the South African Rugby World Cup yet? Or are you still in your victory parade?
Yeah, no, that lasts for about 12 months, So it's starting to wane, but it's definitely not forgotten. Plenty of Springbok shirts being worn around town.
Beating the All Blacks, you got to celebrate it. New Zealand going down. Robbie Koenig, always a pleasure. You're one of the best broadcasters in the game. I'm not just saying that because you're on this show. Always generous with your time. Really appreciate it. You're always welcome. Thanks for coming on Tennis Channel Inside In.
Thanks for having me, Mitch.